Hi, I'm Derrick Jensen. This is Resistance Radio on the Progressive Radio Network. My guest today is Vaishnavi Sundar. She's a self-taught filmmaker, writer, and grassroots activist. She's from Chennai, the south of India. Her last film, But What Was She Wearing?, gave her the title Cancelled Feminist. Even though that is India's only film on the topic that covers voices from women across caste, class, religion, and religious differences, it was canceled on the basis of Vaishnavi's political opinion that men shouldn't be in women's sex-segregated spaces. When she's not filming or writing scathing rebuttals to liberal feminist drivel, she's busy logging all things WTF on her new vlog channel on YouTube. So first, thank you for your work in the world, and second, thank you for being on the program.
My pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me, Derrick.
So your work covers just so much, is so broad and so important. Can you talk about the various manifestations of modern misogyny, and maybe start with sexual harassment?
Of course. I guess to take it a little further back, I think to lay a little bit of context, I think it's important that we establish that I am in India, and India is a large country, and it's filled with unbelievable amount of misogyny that you can't even imagine. So with that being the canvas that we're painting on, the sexual harassment part of it is something, even if I were to draw exclusively on my own personal experience, it is something that I can write a book about. Because the moment you are born, doesn't matter if you're, even a toddler, they start looking at you, they start describing your complexion, your whether you'd grow out to be a tall girl or a short, stout, fat, ugly girl, or, those kind of imaginations or those kind of conversations happen around you. And I've seen it happen to other girl children in the family, so I'm pretty sure it would have happened to me as well. And when it was a time when I could really understand and gather what was going around me, I could make sense of how you are put in this sort of a scrutiny 24/7, whether you're in the house or you're outside. You would think that your house would be a little better, but it never was. So even during, festivals, when families come over, when it's supposed to be an event where, you just let your hair loose and have fun and, play with your cousin, brothers and sisters, no. Because even at that time, somebody's going to come and tell you, you've got to wear appropriate clothing, or your leg is showing, your arm is showing, or why am I playing with boys so much? And, that sort of a constant scrutiny is how I grew up. And, when it was time for me to go to school all by myself and then college by public transport, that opened up a new world of the possibilities of the misogyny, the modern day misogyny as we're talking about. I think I have lost count on the number of days that something so unpleasant has happened to me that I decided that I wanted to just go back home, dig a hole, and stay inside and never get out. I have lost count of the number of days where I wanted to kill myself because stepping out of the house and getting from point A to point B had become so nightmarish that I wish that I didn't have any ambitions at all, that I wish that it would have been easier if I were just not there, if I wasn't existing at all. So with that sort of a early indoctrination of how my existence in the world has caused so many people so much trauma, because they in the whole behind the whole veil of protecting you, they constantly accuse you of being a certain way, which apparently invites men to tease you or to grope you or to rape you, molest you, what have you. So I think for me, choosing this topic to make a film or just advocating against such practices has become a sort of a prerogative in a way, because I grew up experiencing all this nonsense. And this particular film about sexual harassment that I made was timely because it was just a few years before that, the Indian government has sort of passed an act, a legislation that claimed to sort of provide redressal to every working woman whenever she experiences sexual harassment. And I chose to I chose to make a film on this and not just general misogyny in all of India, because I would die trying making a film on that topic. I'd probably keep filming even from my deathbed. That's how horrible it is. So I took this as an opportunity to see how really, as the law claims to be, to see how really protective of its women the act is. So it started out as a very, very modest attempt at educating people about what an act is. It's supposed to be like a 10-minute or a 30-minute film that educates people that there is such an act, so you can go and seek redressal, yada yada. But then it became a matter of 3 years of my entire life where I just went deeper and deeper and deeper, and I realized how grave the situation is. So I really had to spend that amount of time in order to arrive at a very clear, unbiased opinion about what happens to women in India, especially in workplace, especially when it comes to sexual harassment. With regards to other forms of modern day misogyny, I mean, where shall I start? We still have female feticide in practice in some rural parts of India, and from there we have child marriage, and then we have dowry murders, and then we have honor killings, and we have marital rape is not illegal, and then we have the life of divorced or single women who basically can't get a house or find job if she is either divorced or separated, and the usual discrimination that single women face. And then if you're older, basically you are left at the mercy of some sort of a care home, because who cares about older women anyway? At least that's how it's been in India. And this is still like a sort of a, what shall we say? It's just still a glimmer. It's just still a tiny aspect of what it is that we're dealing with in India, because there is, again, a lot of discrimination that is exclusive in terms of caste and class and religion as well. So when I paint this picture, I'm painting this picture of a tiny, tiny minority, and there is just so much to uncover.
So let's talk about your being canceled. How was the film canceled? What does that mean for the film to be canceled? And what does it mean that you have the title of Canceled Feminist?
Sure. So I was selected for an exchange program by the State Department in the US, and I thought I will make the most of it by making sure that I screen my film and I talk about my film crew, because I always believe in spreading the work of my crew members so that then further on they can get more work, and the chain sort of continues. My film was made by an all-female crew, and I'm really, really proud of them. So part of my agenda with screening the film in the US was to make sure that I introduce their work to other filmmakers, so that if they want to work across the border, they can maybe choose my filmmakers because their work is so good. So that was part one of the agenda. And part two of the agenda is to basically just create awareness about the workplace sexual harassment situation in India, one that often gets brushed under the carpet, because people, when they think of workplace sexual harassment, they think of a workplace, they think of an office, they think of an upper class woman who might even be a CEO. While her situation is valid enough, what often people don't realize is there is like a significant percentage of population who don't go to an office, who don't have a boss, are still harassed, in fact even more harassed. So basically, I wanted this to be an opportunity to discuss all of these things and also talk about my crew members. So in New York, I plan to extend the exchange program, and I wanted to screen it in New York because there was this organization, Polis Project, that was interested in screening my film. I had met one of the co-founders. She's Indian, while she was in Chennai a few weeks earlier than that. And we discussed, and she had watched the film, and she thought the film to be fabulous, and that it would be such a right fit for her audience, and it would sort of be an enriching conversation afterwards. Everything was fine, and I left to the US, and the date was soon nearing, and we decided on a venue, we decided on posters, we decided who's going to be the moderator, we decided on everything. One fine day I get an email from them saying that they have decided to unanimously decided to just cancel the event because they found some questionable tweets that I posted on my personal social media, which they considered to be transphobic, and therefore the person who made the tweets was violating their clause on inclusivity and diversity and what have you, all those fancy terms. So they just wrote an email to me saying that they've decided to cancel it. And they did not offer me any opportunity to explain my position or to even place my thoughts on record. They didn't allow me a chance to do that. So the tweets that they were claiming to be transphobic was merely me stating that men shouldn't be part of women's sports because they have an obvious advantage. And another thing was that something along the lines of how a trans person's safe space shouldn't be inside a female bathroom. This among many other little tweets that I might have posted. I mean, things you post on social media, it shouldn't matter, but apparently they dug it up, went years back and then dug it up and then found these questionable tweets, and they wanted to make that the villain and therefore call off the screening. And so then I decided that it was such a shock because, I mean, you often hear this happening to other people, but when it does happen to you, it's a whole new experience altogether. You relive the trauma that you experienced until that time vicariously. You relive it, and now the blow is even, double the effect. And I couldn't reconcile what I was experiencing at that time. But then I sat on it for a few days and I decided to write about it. And then I wrote about it. After I wrote about it, this became even bigger an issue. And then a lot of people that used to commission writing gigs for me, because that's how I make money. My filmmaking career doesn't fetch me any money at all because I have dedicated myself into grassroots activism. So I don't expect to make money out of my films. But writing was something that would, provide me whatever little modest amount of money I was making. A lot of these trans rights activists wrote to all these organizations and then said that I was a transphobic person and that they shouldn't work with me. And that is exactly what happened. And I stopped getting commissions from these people. Although they wouldn't say this is exactly why, they would just ghost me. So since then, within the India social media circles, I have become your most hated turf, if you will. Although, to point out that the film had nothing to do with transgenderism whatsoever. So they decided that because I made a tweet about something unrelated, they chose to completely silence the voices of women belonging to marginalized communities in India, whom they claim to uplift and support and bring in awareness and what have you. They decided to cancel the entire film owing to the fact that I made a tweet on my personal social media account that has got nothing to do with my film production company. So when that happened, I decided this is wrong on so many levels that I decided to not speculate on it too much, but figured that this is just how it is going to be from this point on, and it was exactly how it turned out. All those people that canceled me, the media houses have still not commissioned anything. Earlier it used to be I would send one email and they would usually like the pitch and they would ask me to write, but now 3 emails, 4 emails, nothing. And some people from their personal email had written stuff to me about how they were so disappointed that I was a transphobic person. I still don't understand what that means, what the meaning of the word is, because I'm not anti anything. I'm not phobic to anything. I just want female only spaces.
So is your experience in being canceled like that, unique, or are there a lot of other women that you know of who have experienced something similar?
In India, not a lot, because in India, women are being extremely careful by leaning towards the liberal side, by calling trans women women. Therefore, they might not even believe it, but they end up saying it because it's just safer. Everybody is pronoun crazy. Everybody on social media makes it a point that they write it in order to be part of the whole huge validation circle that makes sure, they get all the privileges of being woke. But what happened to me in India in the present day situation is very, very unique to me because it hasn't happened very many times in the past, and as long as I can remember, it has not happened very many times in the past that women have actually opposed to men in female-only safe spaces like I have.
So there has to be a relationship between sexual harassment of women and the canceling of women who don't want males in their spaces.
I mean, in a way, yeah, because, the only reason why women don't want men in their spaces is because they want to free themselves of a potential opportunity where a man could harass them, What's wrong in demanding such a safe space? The word safe space denotes that they want to be safe in a space. So if men can't offer that safety, or rather, if men don't contribute to the lack of safety, I'm sorry, I misspoke. What I meant is if men end up endangering that safety that women expect or hope to find in a space, then they shouldn't be in it. And demanding such a space shouldn't be such a discriminatory act or some kind of a bigoted opinion or anything like that. If you think about it, these alleged trans-identified people wanting in on female-only spaces are wanting in on female-only spaces because they're afraid that in a generic space or in a male-only space, they're going to be molested or raped or groped by men. And that says something. Now, if you are going to just identify yourself as a female, but you continue to be a man, and then you demand a space in our, in our territory or in our little home, whatever we call it, then that's exactly the problem that they are experiencing. Therefore, they shouldn't be allowed to be in a space like that. The thing is, in India, this whole access to female-only space thing is still a few more years down the line. We haven't gone, to take the example of the Vancouver Rape Relief Fund. We haven't come to that extent over here yet. The trans rights activists are full on campaigning and everything, but our problems are sort of far more complicated than just men wanting access in female-only spaces. So the tweets that I posted may not even be relevant to Indian women, but it is true just the same that I don't want Indian women to ever be in a position where they have to share the space with a man who IDs himself as a female. So this is basically a precautionary way of saying, well, history has taught us that men harass women, therefore we call this safe space because we are not allowing men into this space, therefore men shouldn't be in this space. But then with the whole self-ID concept, what happens is they blur the line about who a woman is, what the meaning of the word woman is, and how there is no word woman anymore, and so on and so forth, therefore creating more opportunities for sexual harassment and any other form of assault for just merely demanding that men are not allowed in certain spaces.
Yeah, I guess what you say makes sense. And I guess what I was trying to get at is that I'm horrified that people don't see the irony of women being harassed because they don't want men in their spaces because in their spaces men harass them. And so the harassment for, I mean, it would seem that the harassment that women receive around the world for wanting women's only spaces should be really validation of the need for women's only spaces.
Yeah, it seems like it, yeah. But, I mean, like I said, the access to female-only spaces in India is still many, many years down the line because women don't have sex-segregated female spaces just yet. I mean, in a sense, for example, if you're a rape survivor and if you go into one of these shelters which you stay at and, you get rehabilitated, you get, mental health support and you feel better and you want to be put back into the society where then you can move on with your life or whatever. There are spaces in India that are providing these services, but unfortunately, there are rapes happening inside those shelters by the people that run them. So we are still a few years away from having self-ID'd men come into these shelters and rape women because we already have men raping these women in shelters. I had written a long form by taking some data out of the government websites, the national, the Center Ministry of Women and Child Development puts out so much data from their website. If only one could look and sort of put things in perspective. There's so much money available for the state to set up such safe spaces, but then half the time because of the bureaucracy and just the god-awful greed of men that most of the money that is set aside never really reaches the women that it is supposed to be for. So when these women get raped in a shelter by the people that are supposed to protect them, we can be safe into thinking that it's still a few years where men demand such a safe space. Also, to give you a little bit of an idea of what it means to be a transgender in India is that right now the trans bill that was passed recently does not just allow self-ID. You've got to go through sex reassignment surgery from head to toe, and there will be, I'm air quoting here, experts who would decide whether or not you have fully transitioned. And just last month, this whole sex reassignment surgery, which used to be such an elite affair and only those that could afford it would get it done, has now been made absolutely free of cost, which means it goes from everybody's tax money that you can go to certain hospitals and you can get your sex reassignment surgery done, and then you can procure your ID of the sex that you desire to be in. Now there will come a time when there will be enough men who have done that and then want in on these spaces. Perhaps this is a conversation to be had around that time. But the trouble is, the trans bill demands that you go through a complete, sex reassignment surgery, but there are so many trans rights activists and, I'm air quoting again, sex worker associations that are contesting this bill because of its discriminatory practices that is forcing these people to go through sex reassignment surgery while they can just wake up one day and decide that they are women. So, in a sense, we're just catching up with the US and UK, and in a matter of 5 to 10 years, we'll get there.
This is a bit far afield, but that's another thing that horrifies me about this whole movement is that there's a long history in patriarchy of genital mutilation. Mm-hmm. And we have, at least, in the United States and the UK, we have entire nations who are celebrating the removal of the genitals of young people and calling this progressive. And that makes me profoundly sad.
It makes me profoundly sad too, Derrick. And what was the nail on the coffin is that trans rights activists wanting no ban on female genital mutilation because apparently it would then come in the way of their optional surgery that they want to do because they want to change their sex or whatever. So that was for me like the biggest blow, because in India, the problem with India is also that everything has got to do with caste here, right? Everything has got to do with caste. Depending on what caste you belong to, there is just like a bucket full of prejudice that is handed to you simply because you belong to a certain caste. And if you're a woman in that caste, just think about it and magnify that by 100x, right? The amount of prejudice that you face as a lower caste woman in India is just unbelievable. Now, about the female genital mutilation situation, it is a practice that is very, very prevalent in India. There is a certain community within the people that practice Islam. There's a community that openly does it. But just recently there was an article in one of the Indian mainstream media where it said if Sudan can call FGM illegal, why can't India do it? India is claiming that there is no FGM because of absence of data. And there is absence of data because the government is not identifying it to be a criminal act. So you get how it's a rock and a hard place kind of a situation where they don't consider something that is a social evil that exists because they claim that there is no data, but they are also the person who is refusing to gather data. So when this aside, there's also other things like how the trans rights activists blanket a lot of people under the whole trans umbrella. It's one thing, the modern day queer non-binary nonsense where little girls feel liberated if they were, I have grown up wishing that I was a boy, because it's just shit for women in India to be a woman. So there have been so many days where I looked at my brother and all the freedom he enjoys and I thought, boy, I wish I was him. So this is a unanimous sort of a consensus that women in India have, much like all developing countries, right? But that doesn't mean you just go to a clinic and get yourself mutilated in any shape or form. But this is just a modern day thing. But we also have this practice called the hijras and the Aravanis and the whole eunuch system that has been there since many, many years during the time of monarchs and what have you. So what these people do is they end up gathering all of them as transgender, and then they claim that this has been a practice that's been going on for so long, and it predates yada yada, so it's something that's been there, therefore we need to validate them, and they sort of include the hijras and the eunuchs also inside the trans wagon. And what they also do is, and this is such a horrible thing to do, but they also blanket intersex people under the trans umbrella. So it seems like there are just way too many trans people who are suffering, who are in need of transitioning, surgeries and everything. But the truth is, it just appears so because these people have conveniently hijacked all the other practices, evil as they may be, as one transgender, as one unit. And therefore, it becomes very, very difficult for young, impressionable people to believe that, well, there is a whole other narrative that people are not willing to listen to.
It with the exception of, I suppose, testicular cancer, and that's just a pure medical necessity or you die. I have never understood why there are so many liberals who are valorizing even historical traditions of turning men into eunuchs. Into castrating. And we are still, and it's the same with the female genital mutilation, that I don't understand how there are any religious or any other excuses for that behavior, for those actions.
And yet they do it. You're right. There is no religious backing to the practice of female genital mutilation because you can't find anything about it in the Bible or the Torah or the Quran, for that matter. And it predates all the time when religion had become, popular in many different countries. The thing is, what these communities have done later on in order to erase the whole concept of female sexuality or female sexual experiences, they have come up with subtexts, or rather a complementary text to the holy book, which apparently was just written by, men, basically sort of been, these documents have been put on a pedestal, that it would be wrong to not consider these documents also as important as the Quran, for example, or any holy book for that matter. So what they have done is they have brought this and turned it into some sort of a religious activity, so that the women that practice it generation after generation are just doing it because that's what God willed or that's what God wants, and if you don't do it, then God will punish you. And that rhetoric is just so powerful because we are a super religious country and we are driven by a lot of governments that believe in these things. So it would be very, very difficult for somebody to scientifically approach this, or worse, to approach this from a female-centric viewpoint and say that, well, if you chop everything off and stitch it, I can't experience any sexual pleasure. Well, they don't want you to anyway, so why would they consider this to be a reason enough to, cancel or to call female genital mutilation illegal? And there are other, intersex surgeries that happen where, medical practitioners prescribe certain surgery in order to make it easier for the child that is born with an intersex condition. And even that doesn't happen, at least in the state that I come from in Tamil Nadu. There is a policy in place which makes it difficult for intersex people who are minors to take a call on whether they can get optional surgery because they were born with an intersex condition. So there's been a lot of ground laid out to make sure that these life-altering situations happen when you're old enough to make such decisions for yourself. But even then, it seems like a lot of baggage behind it because people don't read, people don't know history, people don't understand that there could be a misogynist angle to this entire scheme of things because everybody is being guilt-tripped into being either privileged because of their caste. So they feel horrible that they were born of a certain upper caste. Therefore, they have to do everything in order to alleviate themselves of this privilege so that they can be part of the woke class and they can then be validated like everybody else. I mean, I make no mistakes when I say this, and this validation includes social media validation to start off with. People who do anything for those likes and favorites and everything. People post unbelievable things. You know them personally, and then the things that they post won't make any sense at all. But yet they would do it because it gives them that sort of it champions them as one of the wokesters. So it's hard to reason with people that it's not that they are unwilling or they are not open to reasoning. It's just that they refuse it. They blatantly refuse it. And if you try harder, you're a bigot, you're everything else. Sorry, I deviated there a little bit, but yeah, apart from surgeries that are actually important, otherwise it is life-threatening, I really don't see a point of these surgeries at all, because now there's a conversation going on about uterus transplant and what have you, and people think that a woman has a uterus to give birth to a child. It's not just that. There are many more things that a uterus has to do in the life of a woman from her birth to her death that you can't just remove that organ and implant it into a man and then he will just give birth to it. It doesn't work like that. And it really baffles me sometimes, Derrick, that these are the people that are sitting in, powerful positions, are editors in media publications that just mindlessly retweet something that says trans rights are human rights, uterus implants must be made real, it's discrimination for us and things like that, and then they retweet it, and then you wonder, how did that person ever get into that position of being an editor for a mainstream media publication? But then you realize it's not that they can't understand that it is stupid, it's just that they don't want to mess with it, they don't want to not support it, because then they would come across as and then there's a lot of money as well, so they don't want to be the one that stumps inflow of any cash. So
we have about 5 minutes left, and
okay.
Can you talk about what women especially can do to try to stop these various forms of misogyny, including harassment, including assault, including the destruction of women's spaces?
It is sometimes not fair to expect the women to do anything at all for the harassment that they are facing. It's happening to them, so I don't think it's fair to expect anything from them. But I understand your question. The reason I made this distinction is because not a lot of women are educated and they come from abject poverty. So even if they wanted to, they can't do anything about it. For them, harassment comes as a far lesser of an evil than the prejudice that she faces in the form of caste oppression. So it's not easy, it's not black and white in developing countries, and especially countries that is riddled with caste oppression. It's impossible to sort of say that, well, you're facing harassment, this is what you need to do. As a woman, you do X, Y, Z. It doesn't work like that at all. Because for one, as a solution, I think the first step would be to make sure that you empower a woman to be able to help herself first. Even that's lacking. Even that's something that we haven't succeeded in doing. So I think most of my work has been about empowering a woman enough that she can at least identify this to be a wrongful act and therefore choose to, take an action or do something about it, or maybe even not do something about it, but at least she's aware that something like this is happening, and if it does, this is what she can do. But then what's also important is that women must speak up. Women, and I don't say this lightly, but it is not easy for women to speak up. I mean, I enjoy a public life, but I know that it comes with a cost. So therefore, many women are afraid to speak up about it. But I would strongly urge that they should. And the other thing is, women must educate themselves about the law and legislation of a country that they belong to. Because if you don't know the law, you can't challenge it, you can't question, you can't demand for what's rightfully yours if you don't know what the law says about women. And if it doesn't say anything about women at all, then unless you know it, you can't ask for it. So I guess in summary, I would say that the responsibility of any country to make sure that these social evils don't happen is to first make sure that you empower a woman enough that she can identify this as an evil. And those who are already empowered and they can identify must in turn help others and make sure that they speak up. And once they do speak up, they need to make sure that they understand the law and practices of the country so that they can organize and they can demand, because it's a democracy and that's what we do. When, women get together and something wrong is happening, they can collectively fight about it or find a way to end such a social evil.
So that's all really important stuff. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we sign off?
No, nothing really. Nothing other than this, yeah. I mean, if you ask me to talk, I'll keep talking, but you know what I'm saying.
Well, thank you so much for all your work in the world, and thank you for your work in defense of women. And I would like to thank listeners for listening. My guest today has been Vaishnavi Sundar. This is Derrick Jensen for Resistance Radio on the Progressive Radio Network.